Retrofuture. Yes, welcome ladies and gentlemen to another episode of Radio Retrofuture. And here we have a guest that returns, John Brieger, a game developer who is working on a new board game called The Refuge, Terror from the Deep. And he's returning because the last time he was here I screwed up the audio. So, he has made his return. How are you doing, Don?
I'm doing well. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. I'm hearing the audio from about 30 seconds ago, but things are going well. We've moved forward a lot from original Refuge.
Okay, that's good. So let's just get started with today's topic. You wanted to talk about retrofuturism, about in world building a little bit today. But of course you're here to promote your board game as well. But before that, let's talk a little bit about who is John Brieger, because you also have quite a career behind you already. So,
well, I work as a board game developer, and this is a role in the board game industry where after a prototype has come in from a designer, the developer works to refine that product and get it ready for market. So that might be running playtesting programs, it might be making product changes, it might be making kind of new game modes or new ways for that game to appeal to people. And sometimes I get involved pretty late, and in the case of Refuge, Terror from the Deep, which is what we're going to be talking about today, I got involved really early and had an opportunity to really kind of shape the direction of the product and do some really, really exciting stuff.
Well, where you want to start? You want to start a little bit about what Terror of the Deep kind of board game it is, or do you want to get into the lore of the world?
Yeah, well, I try not to promote too hard, right? I want to talk about interesting stuff, but not that the game's not interesting, but I think it'll help actually to kind of contextualize a little bit of what the game is about and how it's played. So Refuge, Terror from the Deep is a standalone sequel to a game that was released in 2016 called The Refuge. And the original Refuge is a zombie racing game where you're racing to the last safe place on Earth in the zombie apocalypse. And it's 2 to 6 players, and you have this like kind of huge board that fills up with zombies. And part of the genius of this game is it's a very lightweight, approachable game. It's not a big minis game. And there's a lot of gamers that look at those kind of cinematic miniatures experiences and they say, well, this is really cool, but I don't have 2.5 hours and $100. They want a shorter, lower price point experience. And so the Refuge is $40 and has sold pretty well over the last couple of years. And so we started thinking about what other types of kind of these big movie experiences could we adapt into that same format. And we decided we wanted to next look at kind of almost like a monster movie experience, and that's kind of where the Refuge, Terror from the Deep was born. And so later this year we'll be releasing this kind of standalone sequel where instead of racing to escape the zombie apocalypse, you're deep sea divers in this kind of steampunk retro-future world, exploring this mysterious wreckage of this submarine. And you're escaping a kraken, and you have kind of these epic monster movie style fights.
Mm-hmm. All right, I already put the miniatures on the screen. They look amazing. I especially like the kraken and how that is implemented. But yeah, look, what are when you are making a current game? Last week we had S. Drummond on from Mythic Games, and I asked him the question with all these miniatures, with all these extensive board games, is the bar being raised too high for people who are beginning in the board gaming industry? So how about you? We see all these elaborate models these days. So what are your thoughts on that? Can you still bring a board game on the market without intrinsic models, you think?
I think you can. It's just a matter of what type of game are you trying to appeal to. So B&B Games, which is the publisher of The Refuge, is actually releasing 2 games this year. One of them is The Refuge, Terror from the Deep, right? And it's a It's a big game. It has minis in it. Not a ton of minis, but really, really nice, high-quality ones that we think are going to appeal to the kind of gamer that wants that really immersive thematic experience. But the other game we're releasing is called Folded Wishes, and it's a game about origami. And that game has no minis in it at all. It's a very lightweight, kind of super approachable, almost abstract game with kind of these beautiful paper patterns. And we think the people who are interested in playing this game about origami, they don't want a big minis experience. They'd actually rather have cute little wooden animals, and we're actually including origami paper in the box, so you can fold your own pieces if you want to. So you don't have to play the game. And so I think it's less about whether you have minis or not, and really about, can you figure out a way to make your game stand out, whether that's with the components like miniatures, or with the theme, or doing something incredibly novel with the gameplay. Because there are more and more games coming out, you do need to differentiate yourself, and I think that to me is what's important, not necessarily whether it's a minis game or not.
All right, I think that's a good segue into your board game. Like, for what is the game about, gameplay-wise, and what kind of audience does it appeal to, you hope?
The hope that gameplay wise, there's two ways to play. You have a 2 to 6 player race where you found the treasure and now you're escaping the Kraken, and that's a kind of more lightweight game. It goes up to a higher player count, and we think that's kind of, it's great as like that first game of game night. Right. And then we have a 1 to 4 player solo and cooperative game, and this is that kind of immersive cinematic experience. And we want that to appeal to people who are really interested in the world building and the development of the characters, and are interested in kind of living those monster movie moments. But a lot of the games that let you have those kind of story experiences are longer, right? They're around 2 hours. And so Refuge, Terror from the Deep's cooperative mode is only about 30 to 45 minutes, and you get to do things like, you'll rescue a stranded diver, and then you'll discover the Kraken's weakness, and then one of you will get devoured by the Kraken and cut their way out from the inside, right? And you get to live these big epic moments, and so that's really what we wanted to try to show people is like it's almost like a short, kind of a short film if you were going to make like a short student monster movie film.
All right. So how long does the average game take?
Average game is about 30 to 45 minutes.
All right. Yeah, because you mentioned the early type of game night. For the people who are not into like board gaming, a lot of people play a short game before getting to the main game, which may take all the rest of the day or evening. So yeah, are there actually games designed for that purpose?
There are, and I think one of the things is a lot of the games that are designed to be those short games aren't the games that are really heavy in theme and story and immersion, and so that's the space I think that Refuge really shines at. We put a lot of care into, you saw the minis and the characters, and really building out this kind of whole alternate 1934 world.
Right. The more people, the more board game developers I get on my show, the more I realize there's actually this entire board game culture with its own types of rituals.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, weird how that works, but yeah, it's true. I mean, I've got a gaming table by Geek and Son, so I shouldn't be complaining about that. But yeah. So how did you go along with the world building of the Refuge? You already mentioned, there are obvious some BioShock influences there. So how did you go about it?
To me, I think retrofuturism and steampunk, and I would consider kind of steampunk is one type of retrofuturism. The key is you start with a kernel of truth, right? What is the interesting real world thing that I want to keep, and how am I going to build onto that into something fantastical? And sometimes that real world thing is an event, or sometimes it's a particular technology or social relationship or structure. And in the case of Refuge Terror from the Deep, the real-world event we started with was the wreck of the UB-85. And this was a World War I submarine that surrendered to the as a German submarine that surrendered to the British because they claimed they had been attacked by a giant sea monster. And the wreck was kind of discovered and mapped in, I want to say, 2015 or 2016. And as soon as I saw this story, I was like, this would be a great board game. And that was kind of our kernel of truth. And then we kind of built out from there. Well, what would it look like if this submarine really had been attacked by a giant sea monster? Why would people be interested in going to the wreck? So now we think about maybe the wreck contains some sort of fantastic technology that was lost during the Great War. And then I'm thinking, well, if they have a fantastic technology, what was other technology like? And so we ended up kind of settling on the idea that atomic weapons had been invented during World War I. And at the time of our universe, right? They refer to it as the Great War because World War II hasn't yet happened. And and if you look at the use of chemical weapons during World War I, they really were unrestrained in their use. And so if you had applied that to atomic weapons, huge sections of Europe would be irradiated. Because a lot of the reasons that atomic weapons weren't used more is we had learned some lessons about how chemical weapons were used during World War I by the time we had come to World War II, and they said, okay, we're just going to drop 2 and show that we can, rather than use them truly as an offensive means of waging war. And so if you imagine that all of Europe, or most of Europe's landmass is irradiated, now we have a global economy that's tied deeper into sea trade. And what would that look like, and how would that have influenced the rise of diving technology? So by the time we get to 1934, because we're now more than a decade later, we have all these diving suits that are, they look like the diving suits that we had in World War I, right? We had that retro style, kind of the same diving suits that I would say, BioShock and some of these other games have used as their visual reference. But they have the technology and the function of diving suits from the late 80s. We just don't have any computers, right? So we have, there's no longer air hoses, right? We have trimix gas, divers can stay down for longer. And you end up with this really nice blend of it's high tension, but you have an element of familiarity where people can say, okay, I recognize this thing, right? In our case, usually it's the diver suits, and use that as kind of their anchor to make a nautical reference into the world. And I think that's really useful for people.
All right. Well, I'm hearing you now.
Okay. Well, I'm
right,
gonna
we're
post
back.
an edited version of this, so don't worry about that, people.
Yeah. Well, Gulliver and 12G, thank you for sticking with us, and we are back.
Yes.
So you were asking about how do you work together? So players each have their own unique set of abilities. So if you're playing Michael Hill, who's this character in the center of the box cover, Michael is a U.S. Navy diver, and he excels at kind of removing the Kraken tentacles from the board as they threaten to overwhelm you. But if you're playing, let's say, Sophie Saint Laurent, she's a marine biologist, and her specialty is she puts out these little research camera tokens, and when tentacles pass by her research cameras, she gets to move for free. So she's really able to kind of react and shift around the board really quickly. And so depending on which combination of characters you play, we have 8 characters probably, and there's going to be, it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game. You're going to have a very different set of capabilities. for how you're going to accomplish the missions. And I did test, all of the missions are accomplishable by all of the characters. You just might have to pursue a little bit of a different strategy. And you'll be able to acquire these salvage cards as you remove tentacles from the board. You can explore the wreck and get salvage, and you can pass the salvage cards to each other. So let's say I get a propulsion device that you really need. If we're next to each other, I can hand you some propulsion devices. We can set up some really interesting kind of combos for our characters.
All right. So, remind me, where were we before we had our communications breakdown?
We had talked about world building. We had talked a little bit about kind of some of the idea of the kind of the kernel of truth.
Right.
In that kind of historical wreck that we used as the basis. How much will the game cost? Our current plan is it's going to be probably $50 on Kickstarter for the game, and then if you wanted to get a bundle of Refuge Terror from the Deep and the 2016 version of the Refuge, which is the zombie escape one, that's going to be an $80 bundle.
All right. So, are there going to be any Kickstarter exclusives?
There may be some very small ones. The one thing we haven't 100% decided on is I think we might do a oversized like neoprene playmat board, so kind of a deluxe board, and that would be Kickstarter limited. So it would be available only during the Kickstarter, or if you found me at a convention, I would sell you one, but it would never go to stores.
Right.
The other thing we are looking at is kind of integration characters, so a way to play the original characters from the zombie survival game in Terror from the Deep, and that might also be a similar Kickstarter limited thing, where it would just be cards to use with the miniatures from the first game. But in general, everything that's in the new game is not Kickstarter exclusive. We want to make sure that we're including people, right? And that there's a really strong reason to back the Kickstarter now, to get access to the game first, to get maybe some of these add-ons, but not the. But we don't want people a year after the Kickstarter to look at it and go, oh, like if only I backed that Kickstarter, and now I'll never support this company again. So it's a tough balance, right? Because we love our Kickstarter backers and we want to reward them, but we also want to make sure that we're making the game as accessible as possible for people.
Right. Do you already have some stretch goals in mind?
Oh yes. Obviously, we try not to get too much ahead of time, right? Don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Right.
We have some gameplay stretch goals that we've play tested, right? We always make sure we play test everything. So we have some extra missions for the cooperative game that we'd like to add. We actually have 2 extra characters we'd like to add to the game. And the reason that the characters are stretch goals is adding the cards for the characters is very easy, but the miniatures cost a lot of upfront money to make the molds for. So those will be among the first things we'll unlock. So as long as we can make 1,500 copies of this game or so, we'll definitely want to have those characters in it. Including, someone asked, is there an homage to Bunsart in the game? There is an homage to me that's a stretch goal, which is Dr. Hans Krieger, who is definitely not John Brieger. Dr. Krieger is actually like a weird family joke. I don't know if any of the viewers are familiar with the show Archer.
Yes. Oh, Krieger. Yeah.
So Dr. Krieger in Archer is actually is a homage to my uncle, Dr. Ben Brieger, who went to college with the creator of Archer. And while the character is nothing like him, obviously we are German, Jewish, and not secret Nazis. The look of Dr. Krieger in Archer is based off of hundreds of photos of my uncle, actually. So like modeling the facial expressions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I knew that. Oh my god. So, another person says add Bonser to the game.
You can start a fan campaign during the Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah. Well, if anyone has advice on how to do that or wants to put effort into that, I'm more than willing to take that into consideration. But yeah, you mentioned missions. Are there going to be mission books or campaign books?
We're trying right now to keep the missions into a new kind of format I created for this game that are double-sided mission cards. So the front of it might say something like "Wound the Kraken." You hit remove 4 tentacle goal, remove 4 tentacles in a single turn, and then it might have a little set of flavor text about why you want to ruin the Kraken. So you're like, it seems like the way forward is blocked by tentacles. So your only choice is to see if there's any way you can make a dent in this unstoppable beast. And so when you've done that, you flip the card over, and it says, the Kraken is weakened, right? And then you read a little paragraph, and it gives you a reward. And so there's 3 of those in every game, and the way they're structured is kind of, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of a story. And so no matter what 3 you use, you get to tell a really nice kind of little monster movie tale without having to necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? Follow a set script, right? So this game, the first thing we might do is wound the Kraken, and then we're going to establish a supply depot, and then we're going to lull the I can't talk about that one. We have a really nice stretch goal that's secret. Maybe your finale is you're going to activate the escape pods, right? And so you always have this nice little escalation where you have this race to the finish at the end, whether that end is activating the escape pods or restoring power to the damaged submarine or getting devoured by the Kraken and cutting your way out from the inside. There's always that kind of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of the story.
All right. We're already talking for quite a while. Is there anything else you want to to talk about before we go to the final topic?
No. Just if anyone in the chat has any questions, I think that's if there is an homage to Bonsart, I can think maybe like in the rule book, we can have him like giving a mission, right? So you have your play example of Felicia and Bonsart are playing, and Felicia moves her character, and Bonsart passes her a card, right? We do a lot of that kind of stuff.
All right. Where can people find more about you and your upcoming games?
There is a Facebook group that should be in the description of this video, where we post previews of artwork. We ask for feedback from members of the community. We're really interested in building a community for this game and people who we hope are going to love it. And so we try not to just make it let's market all the time. We really want to hear from people.
All right. Somebody says if you include Bonsart in one of the campaigns, at least I guess that's what he means, he'd buy the game instantly. So
there we go.
Sold. We go. Yes, I want to buy this game no matter the cost. Well, there you go. You already got your first Kickstarter backers. When is the Kickstarter going live?
We are looking at kind of early May, probably, is going to be. We're 100% done gameplay, and we're waiting for kind of the last of the art assets because we want to make this. All the art so far has been pretty gorgeous, and so we want to make sure that we can show that off to the best of our ability.
All right. With that, do you have a message for our audience?
I think my message is one of the things that I really loved about working on this project was putting our own flavor on kind of the steampunk retro-future world. And I encourage you, if you're working on your own projects, whether you're making steampunk clothing or props or artifacts, to think a little bit about the story behind the artifacts you're making. And it's not that the tropes of steampunk are bad right? But I think there's more to explore than dirigibles and heavy smoky clouds over London, and I think there's even still a lot of untapped space and untapped creativity from steampunks around the world. So I want to see steampunk as a community move beyond tropes and really dig into the narrative of their artifacts and their clothing.
All right. Well, final message from Mr. 12DD. I just want to say, if this is the end of Stream Sponsor, you did an amazing job. Thank you, as always. And John, if you allow me to call you that, good luck with your campaign. Hope it will become something. I'm pretty sure it will. This isn't your first rodeo, if I'm not mistaken.
This will be B&B's sixth game, I believe. So I think there is good handle on moving these things into production and getting them out.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here and participating in the chat. Yeah. Sorry about the technical problems, but this time it wasn't my fault. This time it was Facebook's.
Or mine.
No, it was Facebook's. It's just weird. I never had this experience before. So yeah, but of course I'll post an edited version, and I'll try to keep as much of John's monologue in there as well. If I can. So yes, thank you all very much for watching, and of course I hope to see you all next time. I don't have another guest yet, but I have some ideas. Yes, we might see John again as well. Yes, and with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna wish you a wonderful day, and of course, make it your way. Goodbye.